Okay, welcome back, beautiful people. It is your girl.
Are you listening? Damn.
Cool. So I am very excited to welcome on this chat today as one of my first, run-throughs on interviews. I've got Ryan Campher here, who is head of data at VML. And I'm really excited for you to unpack a lot of what it is that you do, what you see the landscape looking like. And, maybe you can learn something collectively from this conversation. So welcome, Ryan. Good to have you.
Uh, Thanks, Tando. Are we going to pretend like we weren't talking for 2 hours before this?
Well, they won't have the
What are
context.
we going to do?
No one's going to have a context
Okay.
talking about. Yeah, but I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. I think, especially leading in the space of data in advertising, I think there's a lot that you can, knowledge you can impart on me and anyone else who's viewing this video. So let's get into it. I do have a set of questions that I'm going to be asking, and I will be referring to my second screen, so don't think I'm being rude. But yeah, let's get into it. In terms of data in media today, what does head of data really mean in advertising today? And how do you see this role evolving, or how has it evolved to where we are today?
Um, Firstly, with every media interview, I have to say thank you for having me. And all views are my own and do not reflect any of the other blah blah blahs. So I think that this is really the first, and I say decade, this is really the first decade that a head of data, number one, was necessary, and number two, has really existed in the way that we have it today. Before, obviously, before the advent of social media and the marketing that came along with that, there really wasn't any data to tangibly understand efficacy when it came to advertising. Before then, it really was just what was the tangible ROI of the physical product you were selling, and how did that compare against the previous month? That's a pure accounting function. So, in the last decade, we've moved to different a different version of advertising that has become largely intangible and mostly digital, because that's the way that people consume most of their advertising needs. If we go back to what the roots of advertising were, they were commercial breaks, and they were breaks in things that you were choosing to watch. You were on TV, and for 90 seconds split up into 9, 10 second increments, there were advertisements of products or things that were of the heyday. And we've moved away from consuming it in that way. And as a result of the market shift in consumption of advertising, the role of data in advertising has become necessary. The first part of the question is, what do I do?
Yeah.
Uh, I'm a firm believer that if you can't say what you do in one sentence, you don't actually know what you do. So what I do is, or what the head of data does is, they translate your abstract business problem into an actionable technical solution. That's great as a billboard, but tangibly, what does that mean? The question of why isn't insert company here selling insert product there? That's not a question of logistics. It's not a question of, are there enough products being shipped to shops? Are there enough people to buy it? That is a question of, how do you sway someone's mind from the opportunity cost of buying that product's competitor to buying yours? And the function of that forms a part of data. That's gathering intelligence, it's gathering data, it's ethically using that data, it's understanding how that data translates into a and then moment, the understanding of that sector. So that's what the head of data does conceptually.
Okay, so you look at the business problem, you look at the business in its current state and say, okay, how do we leverage data to solve the business issue, whether it is a platform solution or how then we use the data, the existing data they have, and learn more about our consumers, if I'm understanding
Yeah,
correctly.
yeah, it's a part of it, but for the context of the conversation, yes.
Okay, and then how then do you define the value of data in the context of advertising, right? So you've spoken about how we've evolved from, having very limited data and understanding of our consumers into the space now where social media and digital media are really pushing forward the need for data, then how do we define that value of what data can do for advertising beyond just the dashboards and the reports that we can produce?
So I think that the dashboards and reporting is something that we would define as endpoint usage. So the you can't build a dashboard or you can't build a reporting set or you can't create a database to report out of if you don't populate that database or dashboard with contextual information. And I think that's one of the important elements that we need to focus on is the context of what data does and the context of what data strategy is. I think the broad term of data is a bit too generous to define. I think we need to zoom in on data strategy and say um, there are three main parts to data strategy. The first part is assessing data, so discovering data. The second part is collecting and collating data. The third part is interpreting that data. And sorry, can you just refresh what's the first part of the question again? I just went somewhere else, ADHD.
No worries. Just understanding how do we define the value of data in this context?
Okay, yeah. So the value of the data is its contextual enrichment. And I like to use anecdotal examples rather than technical jargon. So let's use an anecdotal example. Let's say that there was a telecommunications company that saw their their home internet purchases and subscription model rise in January of 2022.
Mm.
Okay, it increased exponentially. So they've now got to think to themselves, okay, either our internet is really good, or we use a different kind of internet to our competitor, or there's a different reason why that came about. And as a data strategist, what you would do is you would look at the contextual elements that contributed towards that. So if we think about it in world terms, there was a 2-year recession before that because of COVID, which means that people may have lost their jobs. People losing their jobs mean that people starting business from home, start working from home, side hustles. There's a work from home migration. Now, your home internet used to just be for you to surf Facebook and watch Netflix, but now you've got to work, you've got to take meetings, you've got to do interviews. So that means you've got to increase the bandwidth, and maybe residential packages don't service that anymore. So you move to the lowest or mid-tier business package, which means a greater bandwidth. So the market shift of behaviors that contextually created that upswing have nothing to do with the product, marketing, advertising, or company, but the data strategy behind understanding how this thing resulted in this uptick is the value of data and data science in this context. And I think that if we extrapolate that further and into more complex scenarios, we start seeing how the value of data when it comes to usage patterns of, let's say, internet banking or first party security elements, that also determines how we then need to start communicating with customers, how we need to start communicating with consumers, and that contextual value can only be enriched by data strategy. That is not a function of analysis. Analysis is translating or effectively translating my interpretation as a technical specialist to a non-technical audience. That's analysis.
Mm.
The strategy of that is once I've communicated that and the user or the end user understands what they need to understand, how do I take that and move forward into the next phase of what my plan is for this?
Ah.
And that's the contextual part we're talking about. Don't say, I don't know this. We talk about this all the time, Tando. Don't pretend for your viewers like you don't know these things. You know these
Hey,
things. We just facilitate the conversation.
no, listen, I actually wanted to say, for example, it's like answering the why. So why has the pattern changed? What is driving these shifts in consumer behavior? And then saying, okay, now that we know why this is happening, how do we leverage what we have to then build on for the future? Yeah, and I do need to, for my audience sake, be at a point where, they might be saying aha too. So, I'm trying to be fair here.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
But yeah, I like how you put that in terms of the analogy, right? It's understanding, like you said, you see this uptake and you're like, oh wow, our product is amazing. And then somebody comes back and is like, no, your product's not, it's great, but the reason why people are now buying your product more than they did before is more so because there are other factors that are contributing, external factors outside of your business that are contributing to the uptake. And then we say then with that, okay, what do we do going forward to sustain this growth? Because that uptake can also just be for a moment in time. How do you maintain that? And I think that's maybe where data strategy also evolves into, okay, what do we do looking forward?
And so this is the difference between academic or technical data science and business applicable data science. Because technical or academic data science would have achieved its goal if it understood the why.
Mm,
So the Socratic method is testing and repeating. Is something repeatable, measurable, and can we test it? What's the veracity of it? That's academic or scientific data science. When we're talking about business applicable data science, it's it's that and then moment. If we think about a separate example of let's take Zoom. Zoom was just another video calling app or platform, and through no marketing, no product placement, no market segmentation of their own, their stock grew exponentially during COVID because it was the opportunity cost existed between that and something like Teams. And the business applicable part of data strategy is how do we now capitalize on that?
mm,
What do we take from there? What elements of usage do we optimize? What elements of usage do we roll out into separate products? Do we break off and segment into different use cases and tier them? That's the business applicable part of data strategy. Sorry, I
mm.
don't want to derail your interview and turn it into a lecture.
Well, you did say some of my videos are lectures, so it would be on brand.
Yeah.
Okay, so now in your capacity, in your situation, what process or decision-making process do you go through to determine which data tools, platforms, or tech partners that you're going to incorporate into whatever the solution may be, right? We can continue with analogies and, non-branded examples just for the purpose of this.
Listen, I think examples have to be branded because it's not, neither of us work for Google. Um, excuse me. So I I think that in the part of data science and data strategy that I focus on. Uh, so firstly, my personal capacity, the where I focus on is international cloud banking security, and a lot of that has got to do with the physical properties of entropy and classification and cryptography. In my professional context, th- a lot of that has got to do with enterprise level agreements.
Hmm,
And I think that's something that needs to be made very clear to anybody coming into the space is you may have your favorite tools, you may have your favorite ways of working, but you need to be flexible and agile enough to be platform agnostic because the enterprise level agreements with that govern the way you work are 99% of your choice. Um, that being said, if I have the choice of what I can use or what choices I use to choose or what criteria I use to choose the platforms, I think they need to be scalable because we may enter into a project that requires a part of that platform or tool,
hmm,
but then the more we discover and the more the data maturity raises within the project scale, we need to be able to scale the usage of that tool. I think there also needs to be a level of customization on that tool. So I don't want to work on a tool that does one thing and only that one thing,
hmm,
because then it's not really software as a service. I've bought a product.
hmm,
Um, and so I think customizable needs to be scalable. I think there also needs to be an element of dynamic extraction.
hmm,
So I need to be able to leverage the insights that the platform allows, agnostic of the platform. An example of that is I don't want to work in, for example, Oracle. You know, if you work in any of the Oracle data science tools, and I'm saying that as a that's my personal opinion.
Yeah.
As you know, any of the Oracle tools don't really lend themselves to connectors with other third-party elements or injection tools, and that's understandable because of their business model. Uh, my criteria, very simple, those three: needs to be scalable, needs to be customizable, and I need to be able to extract from there dynamically.
I like what you said earlier where you spoke about being platform agnostic. I think a lot of the times people get stuck in I am used to using this tool, I am trained in this one tool, and then when you need to shift and now pivot into something else because the organization, like those enterprise level agreements, when you need to then pivot, it becomes a challenge, right? I've noticed. So I think that was very important to note for anyone watching. Learning one tool is not the be all and end all. It's really understanding what that tool can do for you and understanding what it is that you want to solve because there are various tools that can do that for you. But yeah, scalability, I agree. I think that definitely is important because something can start very small and then start, that what do you call it? Snowballing.
Snowball.
Yes, thank you.
Mm.
Yeah, you see now my ADD is popping in there. But yeah, maybe let's move on to the next question here. I wanted to find out from you, how do you approach building data solutions for a country so diverse as South Africa, right? For example, we've got so many languages that you need to consider when you're developing these things, and the literacy levels as well across our audience and digital access. So how do you then approach building data solutions that allow for that kind of access to market?
Um, I think that the first thing we need to address whenever you talk about building solutions is um, there's this concept in architecture, and the concept is called design hubris. And design hubris basically is where the architect builds something that is build something for the glorification by other architects.
Oh,
So
okay.
other architects look at it and be like, "Oh my word, that's really cool because I like the way you use this and that." And then users come into that space, whether it's a physical space or a digital space, and then what users start doing is creating desire lines.
Mm,
So a desire line works like this. Let's say you're building a public open space and you build a rectangular park. And the rectangular park on one end has the exit to the building, and on the other end there's a restaurant. But the path you build goes all the way around the perimeter
okay.
because you want to have your straight lines and your degrees and your proportions. Users are going to start walking across that path. That is the user expressing the fault in your design through
Mm,
their desire. That's a desire line. So
mm,
instead of next time you build it, don't build around the perimeter, build the shortest cross. That's a very simple example, but that's the way you've got to start looking at your approach to building tools.
mm,
Number one, your tools need to be human centric. Your tools cannot be built by an architect or a data engineer for the glorification by other data engineers, because then you're going to use really fancy components and you're going to use really fancy connectors, and your OAuth 2 is going to be like a really complex method. People lose their phones, their fingers are dirty, so their fingerprint doesn't read. So now, because you've got like a deny all policy and a zero movement and zero tolerance data plan, you lock someone out of their banking because you want to make it so crazily secure. So I think that the first thing is being human centric. You've got to build for humans. Then I think the other thing, which is going to be very surprising and maybe counterintuitive, is don't think for all people.
mm. Okay.
Okay, okay. Let me explain. Let me explain.
Okay.
Let me
I
why I
think
said don't
I
think
know
for
where
all
you're going
people.
with this, but explain, please.
Okay, so we you and I are clearly very different in many ways.
Yeah.
Okay, we may use in the Venn diagram of our differences and the things we use that may be similar, the overlap is going to be nearly 99%. Okay. We both use cell phones. We both use messaging apps. We both use social media. We both use banking. We both use delivery. We both shop online.
Yeah.
If I were to build our granularity into a tool that was for either of those, I would split the production into two things when it could have been one. What difference does the function of us completing a purchase online have to do with the language we complete it in?
Mm. Okay.
See, as long as the endpoint function of the tool exists, the customizable part, which is one of the three ways in which I choose a tool, the customization of the language forms part of that initial build. It doesn't form part of the endpoint user solution. That is a customizable beta element that we can plug in at any point in time.
But it doesn't
So
change.
when building it,
It doesn't change
it
the
doesn't change the
overall.
function. There
Yeah.
we go. So people think of tech in a way that may be too granular or too binary in some instances, and in other instances not binary enough. Now, the things that I mentioned were generic human needs. We need to eat, we need to communicate, we need to bank, we need to live.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, when we're talking about a health app, that cannot be the same. There, I do need to think about the individual user
Yeah.
because
Because
our health apps are gonna be biometrically opposed.
yeah. Because again, it
So,
goes back to the idea that heart attacks present differently in women than they do in men. So you need to have that understanding.
if that's true, even that's too granular. Just the fact that you and I don't live in the same house, it needs to be different because you've got access. There are different medical places where you are to where I am.
Mm.
There's different distances between where you do, and so there's a view that is contextual, that is understanding of the end use case, that is understanding of the user and their connection to the use case. And then there's a basic framework. The basic framework goes like this. What is the quantum? So what is the amount that I would need to spend, whether it's intellectual property, whether it's human resource, whether it's capital outlay? What is the amount that I would need to spend to build this? Does the amount, the quantum, does that relate to the solution cost in any way? Once I've spent 100 rand to build this thing and I sell the app for 50 cents, how many 50-cent apps must I sell to get to 100? And then once I get there, what is the propensity for people to keep using it? Because
Mm.
I now need to start adding functions to it to make it relevant and to keep it top of mind and to keep it as fresh as possible. So that it doesn't stay at the 100 rand. It goes up and up and up. And that means exponentially more people must buy it. And then finally, how do I license this? So
Mm.
I know how much it costs. I know how much it costs to get people to use it. Can I sell it? If all of those things don't make sense, then you don't build something.
Mm.
If
Feasible.
they do make sense, is a feasibility study. If it does make sense, you build it very quickly and you do an MVP, you bootstrap it, and then you sell it out like that as a beta version, or you strip it for parts and sell the component elements to different other products.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. AC, I think I even forgot my own question. I wanted to move on to because you spoke to human centered approach and being very human centered, and I wanted to ask then how do you keep data human centered, especially in this world of algorithms and automations? You know, those are being pushed down everyone's throat as the way forward. But how do we ensure that it's still kind of anchored in being human centered?
I think that there is I'm going to say I think we people in tech think that we are a lot smarter than we are. I think that we think we are a lot cooler and better and advanced than what we are. And I say that to illustrate it in this way. The mere fact that algorithms exist are testament to human centricity. Let me explain that. I'm going to give you 10 seconds to write an algorithm. Write it starting now. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5,
Well, putting me
4,
on the spot.
3, 2, 1. Okay. Did you write an algorithm? No, you
Incomplete.
didn't.
Yeah.
Okay. What's your algorithm?
No, let's not go into that. I'm embarrassed.
Okay. Okay. Um, so I'll do the same thing now. So you tell me how long you want me to write an algorithm.
I'll give you, because you're more senior than me, I'm going to give you 5 seconds.
Okay. You ready?
All right. 5.
Okay, go. Come into the door, turn left, down the passage, turn right, sit down.
1.
Done. Okay.
Instruction.
So
Direction.
no. So that's the algorithm to get to my lounge. Okay. Now, when people say algorithm, everyone thinks it's got to be 200 plus lines of code written in Ruby on Rails, and then you got to have a Django instance in there, and then you got to put Python on top of it with a CSS ice cream and a cherry of HTML. No, that's not an algorithm. All an algorithm is a set of instructions to complete a task that can be repeated and automated. That's all it is. So every day when I come in, I fulfill the algorithm that I just described. I come into my house and I go to my lounge. Now, the only reason that algorithm exists is because there's a human who needs to get from my front door to my lounge. If that human didn't exist, that algorithm would be unnecessary. So the human centricity of algorithms have been complicated and convoluted because there are people who are trying to stack complexity above complexity and have lost the human that needs to do something in it. That's how we get products, and that's how we get algorithms that ignore certain parts of demographics. Why there are AIs that can't generate an African face. Why? Because the human beneath that that's using that is 10 to 1 not an African person using it. It was set up by a bunch of people that needed to use it to replicate that.
And that's
That's
how,
not a bad thing.
yeah. I was just going to say,
So,
that's
so
how we
that's
got into that space where there were biases in AI, right? There was not enough representation in the data that they were sourcing and allocating initially in the setup.
100%. And the humanity of AI and building things needs to always hold the end user and the contextual use in mind. Nobody ever signs the end user licensing agreement because it's too long. But inside there, and the way that the builder or the architect needs to think about that is, how is this person using it? What level of complexity? What's the minimum level of complexity that I need to get this thing usable? People often think that the less complex something is, the weaker it is. No, the less complex something is, the more robust it is. Because there's no way to misinterpret turn left. I didn't say 3 steps, then turn left and turn left 45 degrees. No, because my steps are different to your steps. What angle did I enter in? Where does 45 degrees leave me? The simplicity of something makes the humanity of it easier.
Okay.
So how do I keep that in mind is keep it simple, stupid. Don't think you're smarter than you are, and understand that someone who doesn't have the ability to troubleshoot the problems that are inherent of that tool is going to be using it. Someone who doesn't have technical expertise is going to be using it. They can't fix it. They're just going to throw it away. Make it simple so it doesn't they can keep using it.
See,
So
now
that's
we're
the TED
running
talk.
out of time, and I still have so many questions.
It's fine. We can go into my podcast afterwards.
I will move over now. Okay. No, because with what you said, I started like getting a few more ideas of stuff that we could get into. But I think very importantly, I wanna maybe close off with understanding what blind spots do you see often see with agencies or brands over relying on data? Because there's this idea that if we too reliant on data, we can start now encountering a lot of challenges. So where do you see the blind spots coming in from your experience?
One of the main blind spots is security wrapping. I think that's one of the main things because there's um, very little is known about that or very little expertise is carried into the agency environment when it comes to security wrapping of data collection, data extraction, mechanisms that form part of campaigns that rely on PII, publicly personal identifiable information, and the use of that. So I think that's a blind spot that often happens is in the link between a really great concept and campaign and the execution of that, the security wrapping of all of those mechanisms are left behind. I think that's one of the main things.
So governance, right?
Uh, gov- uh, Governance is different to security wrapping.
Oh, okay.
Governance is the set of rules that you need to live by. That's basically the rules on the field.
Mm,
Security wrapping is there are rules in football, but players still wear shin guards.
mm.
The rule says I can't go off my feet and slide tackle you in your knee, but I still wear shin guards just in case someone does that. So that's the difference between governance and security wrapping.
Okay.
Security wrapping is the shin guards, yeah. So I think that's the oversight.
Ah, okay. Because then
Sorry, just on that, governance, legally speaking, governance is the minimum requirements that need to be fulfilled in order for the legislation to be satisfied.
yeah.
So Popia just says, don't do this, but do that. But Popia also doesn't allow for the fact that there are people whose entire job it is to break security layers and get information. So security wrapping protects against that, while the governance part is the Popia element.
Ah, okay. So then we're saying with governance, that is for legalities. We are ensuring that we're legally working within the bounds set for us.
Yeah.
But then with security wrapping, it's almost reinforcing, right? A bubble wrap on top of that to say, okay, we're not, this is how we ensure that there are no leaks or gaps that are created in the processing and the use of that data.
Also that there are no deficiencies or weaknesses, because there doesn't necessarily have to be a leak for there to be information going out.
Mm,
Someone can try and bully their way in to steal information. So it's security wrapping is a very very specific type of protection that you have that's based on your security assessment.
mm,
So one of the certifications that I hold is I'm able to audit an international bank for securities and take their banking protocol online. Now that means you need to be able to identify a wide range of security threats, whether they be physical, whether they be cyber, whether they be theoretical, and you need to build in safeguards for those. So, I mean, we can do a whole nother chat on security, but that is it's a very security is not like for your car. You've got a car alarm that you tweet tweet, and then if you move your car, the thing goes off. If you try and start it, the thing goes off. Cybersecurity, cryptography, and you know, counterintelligence security type mechanisms work on a threat level basis.
mm.
So there are, your IAM and your PAM are different levels of access, and with those are inherent different branches of security protocols. So security wrapping is very, very important, separate, and very different to governance.
As you were
Yeah.
talking, the one thing that kept on coming to my mind was ethical hackers. I just kept on thinking of ethical hackers, but yeah. I
White
think
hats. White hats.
let's close off. Let's just do, we've got 5 minutes here. The last question. So, when, in your opinion, does data and gut feeling conflict, and how, oh, yeah, conflict with one another, and how do you navigate where the data is saying one thing, but you know in your gut, like this is a bit, it's not quite on the money.
That's the crossroads of science and art. So you can't call yourself a data science and then use the phrase gut feel, because there's a science part, data science. There's a Socratic method. There's a method of validation. There's a method of verification of data. You aren't allowed to have a gut feel. Gut feels. I think that question only exists because of the agency environment.
Yeah,
Anywhere else, let's think about data science in banking. There's no gut feel allowed in banking.
yeah.
There are rules, there are legislation, there are practices, there are boards that certify whether you can do what you can't do. If you have a gut feel, you don't have a job anymore. So I think we also need to have a very strict and rigid line between what we are scientists that function in a creative space.
Mm,
We don't we don't need to partake of that creative. We don't need to drink that creative Kool-Aid and have gut feels and I feel or I think this. You're
mm.
allowed to think as far as you're allowed to prove. If you can't prove it, you aren't allowed to think it, because then that's just you coming up with something in your head. It may seem a bit draconian, but I feel we need to remember we may be in the agency space, but we are still scientists.
Yeah,
Your doctor isn't allowed to feel that you have a certain way. He must apply tests to say, as a result of these tests, you get this medicine.
objective truth, right? Yeah,
Exactly, exactly.
I think that makes a lot of sense. As much as we're playing in the space, right, of arts in advertising, it's about emotional resonance. A lot of these things come up. There is then the part that we play in the data spaces. Okay, let us back that up with data. Let us back that up with proof and evidence so that we are not throwing our eggs into the abyss. We don't know what to use. Like, what is that phrase where it's like you hope to catch? You just throw your net and you see what you catch. I forget what that phrase is. But
I've got a phrase, but I think your pod may be PG, so I can't use it.
yes, please. I have younger
Okay.
sisters that watch this. Please. You can do that offline.
Yeah.
No, but thank you so much, Ryan. I think this actually might demand a follow-up. And I'm going to implore that those who are watching, those who are engaging, if you want to see more or hear more from Ryan, Ryan is a ball of knowledge. I enjoy listening to Ryan talk because I always learn something. I always walk away going like, okay, now I feel 5% smarter than I was when I started this conversation. So definitely enjoyed having this conversation with you, Ryan, and thank you very much. You're actually the first person I'm interviewing for this channel, so thank you very much for the opportunity.
No, thank you. I don't have social media, but if you have a TikTok or Instagram or whatever, I will come and have a chat there with you. That's fine as well.
Ah,
Um, cool.
I'm
Thanks
taking
so much.
advantage. Yeah,
Now
I'm
go.
taking
I've got a day. I've got a day today.
advantage. Hey, don't expose me. So, if you do want to find Ryan, you can find him on LinkedIn. He is on LinkedIn. That's the only social media.
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on
Yes, Ryan Campher. Thank you very
LinkedIn.
much. Bye.
Cool. Thanks, Tando. Cheers. Bye.